Hey guys, in this video I'll show you a Magicka Dragonknight Solo Build for the next patch, update 49. It's going to be the strongest solo build for that patch. It parses 72.9k on the 6mm skeleton dummy in the most offensive setup, and it only goes down to 66.6k in a more defensive setup, which achieves the armor cap of 33k. The reason the new DK is so overpowered is Solo Flame, the reworked deep breath, which restores resources based on your missing resources. It's completely broken and allows us to use armor potions and medium armor on a Magicka build, with absolutely no sustain issues. I have tested this one in a lot of places. First the usual, dungeons. I have soloed Veteran Scrivener's Hall, Veteran Hard Mode Scalecaller Peak, and Veteran Hard Mode Fangler with it. As for easier content, I have tested it against the Oakenclaw Westfield World Boss, Pram Cataloger Apocrypha World Boss, and against an Elsewhere Dragon. Now as for the unusual, I've soloed a ton of Night Market bosses with it, and out of curiosity, I've tested it against a bunch of normal trial bosses, so I don't think they were more difficult than the hard mode Fangler, for example. You can find logs and recordings in the description and on the website guide. Sadly, I didn't keep logs of the Scrivener and Scalecaller, since back then I thought the build wasn't final, but there are still recordings, since it was streamed. The build is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. Moving on to skills. This is the base setup that will work for most situations and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. First we have Molten Whip, a spammable which grants you a stack of Seething Fury whenever you use another Dragonknight ability. Seething Fury lasts 10 seconds, increases your damage down by 5%, and increases damage of your next Molten Whip by 33% per stack, stacking up to 3 times. The damage down buff does not disappear when you use the Empowered Whip. Searing Claw deals direct damage and applies a 10-second dot, which deals 10% more damage every 2 seconds. The initial hit is guaranteed to proc Burning stats effect. Disintegrating Dragonfire deals direct damage in a cone in front of you and applies a 10-second dot to all enemies hit and debuffs them with Major Breach, reducing their armor by 5948. Solo Flame interrupts enemies around you, restores 50% missing Stamina and Magicka every 2 seconds, over 4 seconds, which takes 3 times, and deals damage on an AoE at the end. Offset's Contingency, with the Flame, Lingering Torment, and Resolve combination on it, is a 22-second dot, which will also grant you minor resolve, increasing your armor by 2974. Having it slotted will also increase your max Magicka and Magicka recovery, through Magicka Controller passive. This is also your AoE spammable. Take Flight is a cheap ultimate, which deals damage, stuns enemies, and grants you a 20% damage done against monsters buff for 15 seconds. Shatter Spike Mantle is your source of major resolve, which also applies a 20-second dot to enemies around you, and grants you a buff, which adds 100 damage to all of your damage ticks. Incinerate is an ability which releases a fiery wave around you on cast, and then every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. It has increased base chance to proc Burning stats effect. Having it slotted passively grants you Major Subdue in Prophecy. Next we have Elemental Susceptibility, an extremely loaded ability that does a multitude of things. First of all, it's completely free to cast, so it helps us sustain. Second, it applies Major Breach, which reduces enemies' armor by 5948, which is a massive damage increase. And third, it applies Burning, Chilled, and Concussed stats effects at the beginning and then every 7.5 seconds. All of these stats effects deal decent damage, but Concussed will also apply minor vulnerability for 4 seconds, increasing enemies' damage taken by 5%. Chilled will also apply minor maim for 4 seconds, reducing enemies' damage down by 5%, and it will also apply minor brittle for 4 seconds, if you were on your Ice Staff bar, while the Chilled effect procced. And Ice Staff will be part of the instance gear setup. Minor brittle increases critical damage taken by 10%. The Chilled proc will also synergize with our next ability. Elemental Blockade will constantly apply our backbar enchant, in this case the weapon damage enchantment. And if it's the ice version, it will also constantly apply Minor Breach to enemies who are chilled, and they will be chilled thanks to Elemental Susceptibility. Ignis Weapons is a 60-second buff which grants you Major Brutality and Sorcery, and causes your Lair attacks to deal additional damage, up to once every 2 seconds. Standard of Might is an ultimate which calls down a standard, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 600, and reduces your damage taken by 25%. It's always a DPS decrease compared to Take Flight, but it can be used to survive difficult mechanics, thanks to the 25% damage reduction. So that was the base setup, but now I'm gonna show you a bunch of situational skills, which you can use to tailor this base setup to specific fights. Ulf's Contingency is the first skill that has to go if you need to slot something situational, unless the situational skill specifically says it's replacing something else. If it's a difficult fight, where you need all the mitigation you can get, then the skill that has to go is Disintegrating Dragonfire, or Searing Claw, if you need a lot of AoE damage for that fight. First we have Resolving Vigor. Use it for fights where there's a lot of damage happening in a short burst. The heal over time from it is short but very strong, so casting it at the right time can help you survive such mechanics. It can also be used in fights with invulnerability phases, where you can't heal with Ring of the Pellorder or Reaving Blows. Burning Talons is a replacement for Ulf's Contingency, which does more damage but doesn't provide the armor buff. And just like Contingency, it can be used as AoE spammable. Chains of Dominance is a chain ability that you can use to stack enemies. Use it in trash packs or in boss fights with adds that have to be chained. It also applies Major Cowardice, which can be useful against hard-hitting bosses. It isn't worth slotting just for the Major Cowardice alone, but if you already slotted it to deal with some adds, you might as well use it on the boss too. Chains of Devastation is a gap closer which can be useful in fights where you have to move around a lot. Razor Caltrops is a source of AoE Major Breach, which can be used instead of Elemental Susceptibility in AoE fights. Soul Burst, with the Pull, Class Mastery, and Breach combination on it, is an 8-meter AoE pull with a 2-second delay, which will debuff your enemies with Minor Breach, and grant you weapon and spell damage, based on number of enemies hit. Ulf's Contingency, with the Flame, Gladiator's Nasty, and Resolve combination on it, is a different script combination, which trades the Dot from Lingering Torment for the Mitigation from Gladiator's Nasty. Use it in fights where you need more damage mitigation. Next we have Revealing Flare. Use it for more difficult fights, where you, once again, need more damage mitigation. It's a skill that passively grants major protection, reducing your damage taken by 10%. It will also trigger the Magicka 8 passive, which increases your Magicka recovery by 10%. Quick Cloak is an ability which provides major evasion, which reduces your AoE damage taken by 20%. Use it in fights with lots of AoE damage. Burning Embers is the other morph of Searing Claw, which doesn't deal more damage with time, but instead heals you on cast, and every time the dot ticks. Use it if you need more healing. Protect the Brood is an extremely situational ability, which can be useful in fights with lots of projectile damage. It also provides minor protection for 20 seconds after casting. Fleet Tip Wings is the other morph of Protect the Brood, which should be used in fights where you need to remove snares. Next we have Precognition, an ultimate that breaks you out of some otherwise unavoidable stuns. You'll need it to get around some mechanics which are otherwise impossible or very difficult to solo, like for example Inferno's Hold in Zan the Scalecaller fight. Corrosive Armor is an ultimate that limits any damage you take to 6% of your max health for 10 seconds. It's useful in fights with infrequent hard-hitting mechanics. Now let me show you a bunch of examples of how your final setup could look after you apply these situational skills to your base setup. Here is a setup for dealing with trash packs. Soul Burst replaces Elemental Susceptibility. This is a full damage setup, which trades Survivability for more damage. Burning Talons replaces Ulf's Contingency. And this is a tanky setup, which trades damage for Survivability. Use it against harder boss fights or if you simply want a tankier build and don't mind fights taking longer. Revealing Flare replaces Disintegrating Dragonfire. Now as for rotation, what you're seeing on the left is just a list of priorities. Simply recast abilities when they run out and follow this list of priorities when there are multiple things to refresh. And remember that you can pre-buff Shatter Spike Mantle, Incinerate, Ignis Weapons, and Ulf's Contingency before entering combat. Now as for passives, the only passive you specifically have to skip is Trifocus, but only when using an Ice Staff. I am now very quickly going through all of the passives you should get on the screen. You can either pause the video or look up this list on the website guide. Some trees are only needed when using situational skills. For example, Sigic Order provides nothing but Precognition. Moving on to gear. This is a base setup that is meant for overland content and will work for most situations. It should be your starting point when making situational setups. So Tsogvin's Warband, Order's Wrath, Ring of the Pellorder Mythic, Backbard Crushing Wall, and One Piece Slamcrow. If you want to use a different frontbar weapon type, make sure its trait is charged and the enchant is poison. You can find Parses done with an Inferno Staff, Lightning Staff, and a Greatsword in the Parses section. They're roughly at 2.18% damage loss compared to daggers. But there is also gear that can be stronger than the setup from the table in specific situations, or when specific circumstances are present. Sul'Dan's Torment is the best set for trash packs, and for bosses that regularly spawn smaller adds. Now this is a list of alternative gear, so gear that is easier to obtain and can be used while you work towards the best gear, which is basically just Tyburn Wattstalker. And the reason there's only a single alternative is because one of the sets from base setup, Order's Wrath, is also a crafted set. This is an example of a crafted gear setup you can start with. It uses Order's Wrath, which is part of the base setup, but it's also a crafted set, and it uses Tyburn Wattstalker, which was listed in the alternative gear section, and a few pieces of Highland Sentinel to fill the gaps. The setup in the table uses only crafted gear, but if you already own some parts of the regular setup, like Ring of the Pale Order, you can start using them immediately. Now this is a setup you should use in instanced content, so arenas and dungeons. Enemies in instanced content have 18,200 armor, while overland enemies have only 9,100, so this setup will need much more penetration. Medium armor ends up dealing less damage than light armor in instanced content, since light armor provides penetration through concentration passive, but the difference is small, around 2%, and medium armor provides more armor, improves stamina sustain, reduces dodge roll cost, and doesn't increase your block cost, the way light armor does, through its penalties. So in this setup, Ansul's Torment replaces Order's Wrath, because in instance content, you can benefit from the minor Slayer buff, which makes it better. Inferno Staff is replaced with Ice Staff, because Ice Elemental Blockade will improve uptime of the minor breach debuff. When using this setup, you'll have to switch the Thief Mundus to the Lover. And this is a light armor version of the instanced setup. Light armor allows you to continue using the Thief Mundus, even in instance content, thanks to concentration passive. It ends up dealing more damage than the medium armor instanced setup, but it has worse survivability. Warlock of the Depths replaces Order's Wrath, because in instance content, you can benefit from the minor Slayer buff, which makes it better. One Piece Slimecrow is replaced with One Piece Vulcan Scoria. Inferno Staff is once again replaced with Ice Staff. Weight composition goes from 6 medium 1 light to 1 medium 6 light, so we can benefit a lot more from the concentration passive. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree, you'll want to use Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, Fighting Finesse, and Wrathful Strikes. When soloing extremely difficult dungeons, you should replace Wrathful Strikes and Fighting Finesse with 2 of the 4 mitigation slotables that match the fight's damage type, so Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Enduring Resolve. Huge majority of the times is going to be Ironclad and Duelist's Rebuff. Riving Blows is another decent blue CP for when you need more HPS. In the red tree, you'll want to use Bundles of Vitality, Celerity, Expert Evasion, and Fortified. Make sure to use Bracing Anchor in fights where you have to block a lot of attacks, and where you don't have to move that much. And use Bloody Renewal if you need more stamina sustain, in fights with lots of adds. Moving on to race. When it comes to solo PvE, you need both damage and survivability, so pretty much all races have useful ratios. The best race for dealing damage is Khajiit. While the critical damage from Feline Ambush can sometimes be wasted, due to critical damage being capped at 125%, it will never happen in solo content, because there will be no tanks or healers, providing you with the major force buff. The best race for survivability, and what I am using, is Nord. The Ragged Racial will provide around 6% damage mitigation. Now Mundus. Huge majority of the times, you should use the Thief Mundus, which increases your critical chance. When using the medium armor instanced setup, you have to switch your Mundus to the Lover, which increases your penetration. For extremely difficult dungeons, you should consider switching to the Lady Mundus, which increases your armor. Though keep in mind that if you're a Nord, using medium armor, Ulf's Contingency, and armor potions, you will already be at the armor cap, and won't benefit from the Lady. For most content, you should put all 64 points into Magicka. For difficult content, you should devote as many attribute points as necessary to health. For some content, you'll be able to get away with 32 health, 32 Magicka. For the extremely difficult stuff, you'll need 64 health. Moving on to food. Your sustain is completely trivialized by Soul of Flame, so you don't need any recoveries from your food. Bewitched Sugar Skulls are the default option. They provide max health, max stamina, and max Magicka. Having higher maximum stamina means you'll restore even more stamina through Solo Flame, so it's a better default option, despite providing less maximum health and maximum Magicka. You could also use Artyom Pickled Fishbowl, which provides max health and max Magicka. So it's slightly more max health and slightly better damage, but will cause stamina issues in any fight which requires constant dodge rolling and blocking. Solitude Salmon Millet Soup is a cheaper alternative. Moving on to potions. Most of the time, you should use armor potions. They will provide you with 5280 armor, and you don't need sustain from your potions, thanks to Solo Flame. You can craft them by combining Bagloss, Mountain's Flower, and Madcap Chitin. Heroism potions can provide 100% uptime on minor heroism, so they're the best option if going for pure damage, but it's a small DPS gain and a decent nerf to your survivability. On top of that, they're extremely expensive, because they're crafted by combining Dragon Realm, Dragon's Blood, and Columbine. Moving on to Parse. I wanted to gradually show how little difference each defensive option makes, so I parsed first with the full damage setup, and then kept adding more defensive stuff, until I ended up with a setup with armor cap and 64 attribute points into health. I also did a few parses to show how irrelevant weapon type is, to show that you can freely change it. Full damage setup, parse 72.9k on the 6mm unbuffed skeleton dummy. It's a setup which chose the damage option in every possible choice. So full damage skill setup with Burning Talons, light armor instance gear, heroism potions instead of armor potions, and bystat food instead of sugar skulls. After changing the food to bewitched sugar skulls, the DPS went down to 72.2k. After changing heroism potions to armor potions, the DPS went down to 69.7k. After changing the Burning Talons to Ulf's Contingency with minor resolve, the DPS went down to 68k. After changing the light armor to medium armor, the DPS went down to 66.6k. And then after changing all attribute points from Magicka to health, the DPS went down to 64.1k. Now as for the weapon parses, I used the medium armor setup, which did 66.6k DPS with daggers as a base. And the DPS went down to 65.2k with Inferno Staff, 65.1k with Lightning Staff, and 65.1k with Greatsword. Moving on to gameplay. I've already mentioned these in the intro, but I wanna go over them again. As for dungeons, I have tested the build against Veteran Scrivener's Hall, Veteran Hard Mode Scalecaller Peak, and Veteran Hard Mode Fangler. As for overland content, I have tested it against Oakenclaw, Westfield World Boss, Prime Cataloger Apocrypha World Boss, and against an Elsewhere Dragon. Additionally, I have a video where I'm using this build to solo a bunch of Night Market bosses and Night Market dungeons, and a video where I'm soloing some normal trial bosses. You'll be able to find recordings and logs of most of these in the description and on the website guide, with the exception of Scalecaller, Scrivener, and the Night Market stuff. These don't have logs attached to them, so it's just recordings. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.